Welcome back, everyone. This is segment 3 of a 3-part interview with Mike Giresi. Mike is the Chief Digital Officer at Molex. And if you're coming into segment 3 without having seen segment 1 and 2, stay with us by all means. Watch this one, but then be sure to go back and pick up segment 1 and segment 2. So in this particular segment, in segment 3 here, we're going to focus on the organizational change management requirements that are critical to weaving a transformed digital product lifecycle into the fabric of the company. And so, Mike, let's kick off with just some comments and ideas about, whenever we start talking about process and data improvements, it fundamentally means that we're going to have to change the way we do things around here. Let's change the way we do things around here. And when people hear that, they either run away or they, cower or they say, yeah, I like that idea. Let's change. And we can develop strategies all we want. But another important saying that I think, it has been attributed to a couple of different people, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, we can strategize all we want, but if we don't think through the culture side, how has Molex approached the whole aspect of organizational change management?
Well, we've actually established, Derek, a team that's part of our transformation management organization that does nothing but organization change management. And I'm happy to say that they are extremely well regarded and well thought of in the organization. The OCM aspect of these programs is so hypercritical. And I think sometimes people think about organization change management as training or kind of, making sure people are aware of change or they're aware of something happening. But we view it a little bit differently. We view it as cultural change. And there's transformative change that needs to happen across multiple disciplines. And then there's OCM that needs to take place in those disciplines. And all of it needs to be correlated and coordinated very effectively. Otherwise, you're going to be confusing people and creating a lot of headwinds against the program. Yeah. We spend a lot of time on this. And I can tell you that it's one of the reasons that we've been successful so far. More opportunity to improve for sure. But without it, I don't think we would have made anywhere near the progress that we've made on the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a dedicated team is such a great asset. Whenever you're trying to do transformation like that, it doesn't work if you're just doing it, as every now and then. Let's focus on it. But so that's a great approach. And I know that some years ago, I think you mentioned that Molex initiated a data program aimed at changing the culture, and to treat data as a corporate asset. Right. What role does data and analytics play in the transformation at Molex and as part of this OCM thing? How did you bring, organizational change management and data and analytics kind of all together?
Well, I can't understate the importance of it, in terms of helping connect people to why certain culture change needs to happen. And what their role in it is, quite honestly. I mean, if you look at how we perform today, the areas where the customer doesn't really feel we show up effectively are directly correlated to the areas that we have not optimized how we execute in support of the customer cross-functionally. Yeah. And there's lots of data points that we can point to. There's some very obvious ones. And if we miss a commitment date, or we don't provide great transparency to lead time, or a customer can't find where they are in the cycle of innovation, it's really critical that type of information is available and be consumed by the customer in a way the customer wants to consume it. Well, for that to happen, the amount of change that needs to take place across the operating model is really significant because there's many, many roles that contribute to those outcomes. But ultimately, data is kind of the underpinning asset that is produced so that the customer can determine those types of answers to questions of that nature. So we started with, I think I mentioned this in the last session, we started with this concept of what outcomes do we want to achieve? Like what what would be truly exceptional in terms of how we show up in the market and how the customer would reward us? Like, what would be transformative from an experiential perspective? And then we took that information and we connected it to, here's all the data results of the things that we do today that disable our ability to drive that outcome. So let's go attack that. Let's really understand why those results are being created and what needs to change so that we can disintermediate that. And that's how we started the program. So in other words, let's not pretend like we have the answers. Let's really use the data and show how the data is created by action, by behavior, and educate people. Like, by doing this, while you think you're adding value, it's actually not leading to a result that benefits the customer. So we need to change that. And by enabling that type of visibility, people started to understand, well, I get how I connect to the customer experience. I think I understand how I connect to the vision of where we're going. And now I understand why this step is so important, and how this one little activity, like the creation of a SKU number, how that impacts the entire consequence that the customer experiences. And I think it's super powerful. It takes time, Derek. It's not something that, to your point, it's not a switch. You have to fight kind of well, if we just use more AI, we'd be better at this. Like, yeah, AI is great when used effectively in a proper use case, but if you have no data efficacy, you have no history, you have no use case which to apply it to, what exactly are you trying to solve? Yeah. And I think you really need to be very prescriptive on that. So we've kind of taken a step back a little bit in terms of, let's really define what it means to have data as an asset, and then build towards understanding in terms of how our behavior implicates that outcome and what we could be doing differently to improve that.
Mm. Yeah, that's such a critical point. So many, and I'm sure you've seen it a million times in your previous life as well. So many organizations that have tried to embark on a data program where they say, we're going to make data a corporate asset, have done it in this kind of almost like a science project, a separate little bubble, unconnected to what you're trying to do in the organization and the business value and all those kinds of things, and really locking it in the way you guys have is absolutely a key hallmark for the way to do things the right way. So I just want to congratulate you guys on the approach that you've taken. I think it's fabulous and a great example for everyone else. Just as a final question, I'd like to throw out there for you, Mike. In this series, we've talked about the technology drivers at Molex. We've talked about the process and the data improvements, and then now we've spoken a little bit about the organization change management approach that you guys have used, and you've shared some really great insights for us. As we close out this final segment, I wanted to get your thoughts on one final thing. If you were bumped into someone who was like a brand new chief digital officer, just starting out on, how to do digital transformation and trying to create a journey around that, what would be your advice that you would give them, regarding what they're about to step into and how to hold it together and how to be successful in that role?
Well, that's a great question, Derek. I mean, there's so many things that come to mind. Like, first and foremost, why am I doing this? That might come to mind. I think the most important thing you have to do is establish vision with leadership and really understand where leadership is, meet leadership where they are, and then help to take them forward. I mean, I could say you need to have the right resources. You need to make sure you have clarity in terms of what outcomes you're trying to achieve, right? There's a lot of challenge. Is the transformation a transformation for what the company wants to become versus what they are, or are they really mature? If they're a digitally mature business, it's a completely different situation because the leadership already knows how to operate this in a digital manner. So it's more about accentuating those capabilities. But if you're coming into a traditional business that has not been digitally native, I think the most important thing you have to do is ensure that you have alignment with leadership and sponsorship with leadership to bring a program forward. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is. What are you going to try to achieve, and keep it within reason? I think one of the most dangerous things we do in our desire to add value and our ambition is we try to overstate what can be accomplished. And in many cases, it's really the small, meaningful improvements that build to these like large transformations. And I just think without those relationships with leadership and the key stakeholders in the business, you're going to struggle to be successful, because I don't care what company you go to, it's not easy. It always takes more time than people would like it to. And there's going to be more missteps than successes initially. And you have to have those relationships that you can rely on to carry you through those periods so that you can yield to bring forward a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great ideas, great approach, and great insights, Mike, that you've shared with us. I'd like to just again mention to the audience, make sure that you pick up the previous two segments as well. I think there's real gems of wisdom and insight that you'll get from that. So, Mike, with that, I think it's a wrap for segment 3, and I just want to again thank you so much for joining me today. And to the audience, please be sure to visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, both the previous 2 that I've alluded to with Mike, as well as many others that are out there on similar kinds of topics that you need to see. So once again, Mike Giresi, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks, everyone.